Hello, welcome to Design Time. I'm Jackie Lacey. We are incredibly fortunate this week to not only have my dear friend Sandy Schroeck joining us. She's here teaching a class, instructing the Wedding Bliss course that's going on, but she also, for your pleasure and education, is the membership chairperson, national membership chairperson for Aifd. So I thought it might be a great idea with the series that we're doing on the elements and principles to add in a time for us to kind of discuss for those people that are preparing for the PFDE coming up in Las Vegas this year, to sort of guide them through some of the things to be cautious of while you're testing, but also some ways to get you a little more comfortable on an everyday basis for what you're going to expect. Sandy, welcome, and thank you so much for being here. Again, she's my really dear friend, so we're kind of more like brothers and sisters. One of the things that a lot of people ask us is, how do I best prepare for the PFDE? One thing that I find is always really great to talk about right up front is that you want to pay close attention to your mechanics. Mechanics are incredibly important, aren't they, Sandy? Do you want to expand a little bit on that?
Yeah, mechanics is something that's a subjective criteria that we evaluate on, and so it's very obvious. So an evaluator looking into one of your designs, the mechanics, they're going to come in, they're going to start looking down in through the arrangement. In this arrangement, I actually put the foam level with the container so that I don't have that problem of hiding the foam. I started with a leaf that came over and covered half of the foam, and then I have poked some of the flowers right through that leaf. So a little bit less mechanics to hide so that I don't have to worry about that. But so thinking about that as you're preparing your container and kind of going in.
One thing that I will say too that really helped me when I was testing is that you want to make sure that you save yourself a little bit of time. I tried to figure about 5 minutes or so per design at the end, so that you've got time to look at each design, and you have to do 5, so you want to save that 20-25 minutes to make sure that you're getting your cloth on the table. And then the very last thing I did is, as you notice, Sandy got down here. We are foam Nazis. We're going to look for any kind of exposed foam because that's one of the first things that you're going to see. So really get down in. Do I see any uneven edges? Do I see any exposed foam? Are there any tears, rips, or spots that might be in some of the products there? Be sure and check those mechanical things towards the end once you've got everything on the table and it's a really clean shot. What about us? What are some of the other things that you might think about?
Well, the other thing is that, you know, your table, you're looking at brown table, so you look into your design. All of a sudden, when you take that tablecloth out, I actually recommend to, at the 30-minute mark, get your arrangements on the tablecloth, because all of a sudden, with that increased light coming from a white tablecloth, you're all of a sudden able to see a lot more potential mechanical errors. And so just looking at it, it's like turning on a light, putting it on that white tablecloth. So
sure, just like we're reflecting a lot right here with the cameras that we've got in the studio, it reflects off of shiny surfaces and really clean white cloths. So once you get that cloth in there, you are going to be able to see underneath. And you want to make sure, and we're not looking just so that we can find something, we're looking at what your client, customer, or even more importantly, the camera would see in a finished product. What are one of the other things that you want to really be cautious about as you're starting to practice and prep yourself for PFDE?
Well, my biggest recommendation is to think about what the evaluation criteria is. So there's 10 elements and principles that we evaluate on, and so you want to make sure that all those things are present. So as you're looking, when you look online on Aifd.org, you can see those criteria under becoming Aifd, about the PFDE test. So as you're going, my recommendation is to get those written on a sheet of paper and put it right in front of your workstation. So you have that mental checklist that you look at each arrangement. So when you're designing for the evaluator is different than the customer. Those 10 criteria, like somebody says, I like lilies. So I like hydrangea, add in tulips. Those are the requirements for that arrangement, what the customer wants. Well, the evaluator as a customer, they want line, color, balance, proportion, looking for a strong focal emphasis, and we'll kind of touch on some others as we're looking at the arrangements.
That's a great way to look at it, and remember that. Write it down. You want to get it on your station, your workplace, where you're going to look at it and see that every day and practice every design that you do. Look for those elements and principles. But thinking of those elements and principles, or the evaluator as your client, and that's what they're asking for, is a great way to prep you for going forward. Good suggestion there. One of the other things that I think is really important when you start to look at the designs is also make sure that you're very comfortable with the elements and principles, what the definition is according to the Aifd guide for floral design, but also what helps you to remember those. I know I have a play on words, and I'll go down to 1 or 2 words because it's a lot easier for me to remember that than to remember the definition that's in the guide. But making sure that you are really comfortable with that and that you go through that list the same way each time will make sure that you don't skip over or forget something. As we move through the designs, now you've got your designs on the table. What are some of the things that the evaluators are going to be looking for?
So the evaluators, along with mechanics, it's not only about just foam showing or tape showing. They want to look and see that you have clean lines. So on this example, you can see the leucadendron have become a strong focal emphasis with the line there. So you can see that flowers have different personalities. So here's the way the leucadendron started, and you can see it would be quite a bit of different crossing lines on there. But what I've done is just elevated that element of line and used that brown creative or strong stem to bring that deeper color in. So I really exposed that stem. Each flower has a personality, and as you look at them, here I did the same thing where I cleaned up the roses to get a really strong line. As you're looking at a rose stem here, make sure to remove the guard petals, clean it up, and that's professional application of mechanics. So it's not only about the foam, but it's taking your flowers and tailoring them, maybe changing some of the appearance from a focal flower into a filler flower. So for example, down here in the focal area, we use the strong red hypericum, which normally is a filler flower, but because of the strength of the color and the mass grouping that I did in the basing technique, that becomes my focal and gives depth through the design, coming from a straight line coming across and repeating that with the hydrangea and with also the carnations coming in. So I'm just altering kind of how a carnation would look. Many times we just see carnations up and exposed, but here I created kind of a line of them to just create a different look. So then to get the higher scores as you're going, the really thing to get the 4s and 5s is adding that creative emphasis. So that's adding some of the design techniques and applications that you'll find in the manual and using some of those to really elevate your design. So I'm not only tailoring my basic flowers, but here I use the technique of just braiding the lily grass, and as I'm looking at it, you want to make sure that it's consistent from one to the other. So the other trick that I use is I use my hands to measure. So the spacing on the braid on the lily grass is about a finger long, and I know that I always have my hands with, and I can use those and use that to be able to space out so that both of these lily grass are consistent in the way that they're wrapped and the way that they're finished.
One of the other things too, if you'll remember the last couple of weeks, we've gone over line and we've gone over texture, which are also incredibly important as part of what the evaluator will be looking at. And if we look at this design that Sandy is talking about, we can see that we've got that beautiful smooth texture of the foliage like we talked about last week, with the fluffy sort of spiky texture from the dianthus. We've got the smooth look of the berry that's in there, and then we've got the roughness of the bark. So we've got all of the texture going on that an evaluator is going to like when they look for it. With line, remember that we talked about that the week before last. We've got great strong line that's very clean and distinct. And like Sandy said, it draws your eye in. You can see right away that that's a good sharp line. As you start to manipulate and tailor those pieces to give you some strong line, remember that you want to save all those pieces. The job's not over till everything is finished. So save everything till the very end when you clean up, in the event that you want to use something for adding creative flair or covering some of those mechanics. Provide you with all the product that you've got at your fingertips, and then you can choose what you want to use and how. And Sandy's going to talk a little bit more about how we add some creative flair into those designs towards the end.
So just as we're talking about line too, just one other topic on it is that proportion is definitely, proportion and scale, one of the things that are analyzed on. So lots of times we hear 1.5 to 2 times the height of the container. But when you're really looking for a strong line and strong proportion, it still needs to be in proportion to the container, but you can see this is a very pleasing arrangement, the way that it's done. But I could add more extended proportion, adding in another element and bringing in that bark. But
let me just ask, while you've got that up there, with the curve that we have on this particular line, would it be important to the evaluator, since you've got this beautiful, sharp, clean curve with the lily grass, should the Pfci willow also be curving in that same direction, or is that something that they're going to take into consideration?
most definitely. You can see that these, if I come here and turn these this way, what I've done is interrupted the visual flow that I have going on. So I start from my top flowers, come down into the focal area, the strength. The curve of the lily grass brings me back, and I end up at these two elements here. So if I go back up and these are all of a sudden tipping out, my eye goes out of the arrangement and it's going to have a hard time finding its way back down to the focal. So it interrupts the flow. If I turn them more this way and tailor them in, so the curve follows the same curve that I've got going on with the lily grass, it's going to feel like the natural flow coming in here and then here, back down in, and the two sheltering pieces coming over each other. They just bring you back to that level and kind of just continuous.
So remember that the definition for line is the way that the eye visually moves through the design or the composition. So if everything is going in the same direction, or everything strengthens or supports the same direction, then your eye pleasingly moves through the design. And if it can continue to circle and not really find a place where it's interrupted or stopped, then that's going to be a higher scoring evaluation because of the way everything works together.
Another quick tip that you can do is just cover one eye too, because it takes away that multi-dimensional. So you get a clear picture of how things look without such dimensions. So then you can really see crossing lines. That's really important in photography because you do take it from a multi-dimensional item to something that you're photographing. So if you cover one eye, it takes it to the level that the camera is going to. So,
and remember that knowing and understanding creative flair and the way you add that to a composition is very important, because what you're going to do in your shops, your studios, your workspace on a daily basis may not be to the extent or the level that you really want to put that in front of the evaluators. You want to show them that you know how to manipulate and control the elements and principles and make them work together with that creative edge. Remember, with Aifd, we're looking for above average designers. So doing something like this that is very beautiful, it's pleasing, we have some movement through with the Midolino, we've taken the Equisetum and we've sort of wadded it up, but is that enough? Is this above average to the average person that might be ordering it from an average city and an average state across the United States? Make sure that you go to the extent, but you want to keep it, I would suggest, and you may give your opinion as well, to not do any more than 3 of those, because you want it to be very distinctive, you want it to be easily seen, and you don't want one to override or confuse the other. So keeping it to no more than 3 creative additions will allow the evaluator to focus in on them right away and evaluate specifically those tips. Anything else that you'd like to add to that?
Yeah, just, I mean, here, the other thing we did was repetition of 2s. And so lots of people, more average design, they think they got to design in odd numbers. And so we purposely did 2 on each of the elements and coming in so that that repetition follows through. And you talk about techniques. So, and Jackie talked about not throwing anything away. So here you can see a little bit that I've used the base of the stem of the leucodendron, and all those stems, I laid them on a table and I cut them all at the same direction. So, and then a placement in, stair steps that right through there. So it's just a minor touch. Another thing that we saved is the leucodendron leaves. So we use some of the bullion, and what designers or where evaluators are going to look for is consistent application. So as I went through here, I wrapped around 4 times, went to the next one, wrapped around 4 times. The spacing between my leucodendron leaves are very similar, and then I'm just going to come in and just draw a little bit more attention to that tailoring technique that was done, adding that finishing touch, just another division line that brings your eye from the back to the front. So that adds that depth. So anything I do on this side, I'm going to bring to here and make sure that people feel the depth in the arrangement as well.
So if we look at this particular design, we can see that we've got groupings and clustering, so that's one technique. We've tailored the product, that's a second technique, and then we've braided and and added a little banding on this particular stem, but it's the same color, so I don't think that that one's going to count as too many techniques. We basically have 3 techniques going on in here. It's very easy to see them all and evaluate them individually.
Yeah, these are more like design applications. So the sheltering would be more like a design application, and then just the small banding. And I mean, it's not very big. Same thing, I use my finger to do the spacing. And so it's not going to be overpowering, but when I did that copper wire down on the bottom, I wanted to make it feel purposeful. So by using a little bit of repeated element up on the leucodendron stem, it just draws a little bit more attention to that and carried through. And so I use that copper wire in 2 spots that it feels like it's not just afterthought and added in.
Great. So as you can see, if you really break down what you're practicing, what you're studying for the PFDE, you can dispel a lot of the things that would be scary at that last moment. Don't try things that you've not done before. You're practicing them along the way, so you're going to be very comfortable with how to apply those. Sandy, thank you so much for joining us today and really explaining. Remember that if you have any questions, you can reach out to us either on our Floriology Facebook page, or you can reach out to either one of us. Our emails are provided. Just ask on our Facebook page how to get in touch with us. We'll be happy to help you in any way. Or you can also join the PFDE candidates or the candidates for PFDE that's on Facebook, where a lot of things are shared and explained about PFDE to help you get prepared. Make sure that you've studied, make sure that you're practiced, and that you do your best. That's all we're looking for. Thanks again, Sandy, for being here.
Thank you.
Join us again next time for Design Time. If you enjoyed that video and you'd like to see more, subscribe.